I've seen a lot of crime scenes that try to lie to me. Some scream for attention. Others whisper just enough to leave doubt lingering in the air. But this one was surgical in its silence. And silence, for a seasoned forensic like me, is often the loudest clue. The call came just past 6 a.m. A maid at the Cortez Grand Hotel, downtown Miami, had found a woman dead in one of the penthouse suites. The door was double-locked from the inside. No forced entry. The room was spotless, too spotless. The body was found in the en-suite bathroom, collapsed beside the tub, with a wine glass shattered on the floor. At first glance, it looked like a suicide. The woman was identified as Vanessa Holt, 37, a pharmaceutical sales rep in town for a convention. Pill bottles neatly lined the counter. No suicide note, but traces of zolpidem and ethanol in her blood suggested she'd mixed sleep meds with alcohol. The hotel CCTV showed no visitors, no unusual activity. Everything pointed to a textbook overdose. But as I stepped into the bathroom, something didn't sit right. I scanned the scene with that part of my mind that never turns off, the one that doesn't look for blood, but for absence. Absence of struggle, absence of clutter, absence of logic. And then I saw it. The wine glass was broken across the bathroom tile. But the largest fragments of glass were under the door, right where it met the hallway, not outside the room. Inside, the glass had clearly shattered against the bathroom side of the door. That meant it had been thrown from outside into the bathroom. Or more likely, the door had been closed and the glass had hit it from that side. Why would a woman locked in a bathroom throw a glass toward a door she knew no one could come through? I didn't say anything yet. Just pulled out my phone and took several photos at low angle, zooming in on the fragments. Then I checked the hinges. Standard swing-in bathroom door. Meaning, again, all the glass should have been well inside the bathroom, unless someone had opened the door, thrown or dropped the glass, then closed it again after. So now the suicide theory had its first crack. Back in the suite, I noticed the do not disturb sign still hanging from the door, but backwards, facing the hallway. Most people hang it with the message outward. This looked flipped, like someone had removed it, then put it back hastily. I walked over to the desk. On it was Vanessa's laptop, still on sleep mode. When I opened it, her browser was on the hotel's booking portal. The timestamp showed 2:42 a.m. She was trying to extend her stay. Why would someone plan to end their life and, moments before, try to book extra nights? That was my second fracture in the case. Now I went full autopsy on the room. I found a champagne cork behind the minibar, but no bottle. Room service didn't deliver any that night. Vanessa's credit card had no recent transactions, which meant someone else brought it. I requested the room keycard logs. Hotel records showed only one card had access to suite, Vanessa's, but I'd seen this before. If a guest orders a duplicate key at the desk, it's often not logged as a second entry. It just updates the last one. And guess who was working the front desk that night? A man named Eric Mullins, 24, temp employee, no criminal record, but an Instagram account that showed he'd recently followed Vanessa, liked a dozen of her photos, and commented on one. "Hope I see you in Miami, winky face." When we brought Eric in for questioning, he was calm, too calm, said he barely remembered her, claimed lots of people checked in that night. No big deal. So I showed him the glass photo. "The one under the door," I said. "You remember how that got there?" He blinked. That was his first tell. I told him about the duplicate key process, about how Vanessa's browser showed she tried to extend her stay, about the cork. Then I dropped the last nail. We dusted the inside of the bathroom door for prints. The outside had a single partial thumbprint. The inside had none. None from Vanessa. None from anyone. A wiped surface. The only prints on the glass shards? Eric's. The truth unraveled quickly. He had waited until the lobby shift slowed, printed a duplicate key, entered her room with a bottle of champagne, hoping to charm her into something. When she turned him down, he panicked, pushed her. She fell, hit the counter. Blood pooled at the base of her skull. He cleaned up, staged the scene, locked the deadbolt from inside, left through the suite's second access door meant for staff. then circled back to replace the Do Not Disturb sign and make it look untouched. But the glass, he didn't think about the glass. Sometimes, it's not the body that tells the story. It's the mistake, the tiny inconsistency that shatters the illusion. In this case, it was one broken glass and the fact that it was on the wrong side of the door. The glass that screamed louder than confession. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the scene was a paw print. Small, well-defined toes, smudged slightly in dried blood. A dog, I thought at first. But the homeowner was dead in the garage, and something about it felt off. Her name was Margaret Talbot, 62 years old, retired schoolteacher, widowed. Neighbor described her as meticulous, quiet, reclusive. She'd never owned a pet, never left her doors unlocked. And yet, there she was, burned alive inside her own car, inside her closed garage, in the middle of a quiet Boulder, Colorado neighborhood. The initial theory? A car malfunction. A sudden electrical fire. But something was wrong. The seatbelt was tied shut from the outside, like someone had made sure she couldn't escape. And then there was that damned paw print. Inside the house, there were no signs of forced entry. But there was blood. In the living room, tiny drops leading toward the kitchen, and along the hallway walls, more paw prints. I called forensics to make molds of the prints. While I waited, I scanned the furniture. Nothing out of place, except for a recliner slightly pulled back. Behind it on the baseboard was a perfect circular imprint, like where a hidden camera had once sat. Upstairs, Margaret's bedroom was pristine. On the dresser, an old photo, Margaret and a boy, likely her grandson. Notes from him were scattered on the desk. Love you, Grandma. Visiting soon. His name was Ethan Talbot, 27, ex-Marine. His military file listed PTSD. I dug deeper. Just a week ago, Margaret had changed her life insurance policy. Ethan was now the sole beneficiary. Back to the paw print. When the molds were ready, the result confirmed my suspicion. It wasn't a dog. It was a tactical boot modified with rubber pads, designed to mimic a canine footprint. A decoy, a trick to throw off a first-glance investigation. Margaret never owned a dog, but the killer wanted to look like there was one, which meant they weren't trying to fool police. They were trying to confuse someone else. In this case, her granddaughter. She was the one who discovered the scene. Amber Talbot, 19 years old, claimed she came by for a surprise visit. Said she smelled smoke and opened the garage. But her story had too many details. Things no one would know unless they were there before the fire. I had her watched. Then I pulled phone records. She and Ethan had talked the night before. 42 minutes. She was the emotional pawn. Ethan had laid out a plan. Fake a break-in, stage an accident, mislead investigators with the dog prints. He'd sneak in, tie Margaret inside the car, trigger a short in the dashboard wires, and vanish. Amber would come in the morning to find the body. But Ethan made 3 critical mistakes. He underestimated forensic logic. Footprints don't lie. He overlooked his grandmother's habits. Margaret was obsessive. She'd hidden cameras, local storage only. One memory card was later found behind the microwave. He misjudged Amber. 2 days later, during a second interview, her voice cracked. He said he just wanted the pain to stop. He said she wanted to go. But Margaret didn't want to die. A voicemail she left for her neighbor moments before the fire proved it. If anything happens to me, someone broke in. I heard footsteps. It wasn't a dog. It was someone I know. It was Ethan. And the detail that gave him away was a paw print designed to mislead. In a house that never had a dog. There's something about crime scenes at night that hits different. Maybe it's the silence. Or maybe it's the way artificial light plays tricks on your mind. But this one felt staged the moment I walked through the door. It was a 2-story colonial in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Quiet block. Retired couples clipped hedges, American flags on porches. The call had come in just after midnight. Possible burglary, suspicious death. What we found wasn't chaos. It was too calm. That's what bothered me. The victim was Charles Dunley, 48, corporate accountant, divorced, lived alone. He was found in the living room, seated in his favorite recliner, remote in hand, eyes wide open, dead. No sign of forced entry. No struggle. Just dead. But here's the detail that grabbed me by the throat. A single candle burning on the coffee table in front of him, vanilla scented, half melted, and I knew that candle shouldn't have been burning. Why? Because the thermostat read 71 degrees. The AC was running. The windows were shut. No dinner on the table. No signs of a power outage. Why light a candle in a well-lit, cooled house with no romantic guest or dinner ambience? I asked the first officer on scene if the power had gone out. He said no. Electricity was on when they arrived. So, who lights a candle like that? And more importantly, who lights a candle and then dies mid-TV show, holding the remote? I moved closer. The candle wax had spilled slightly onto the edge of a stack of magazines, but it wasn't flowing toward the floor. It had pulled upward, meaning the table had been tilted slightly, then set back into place after the wax had cooled. That told me two things. Someone had moved the table during or after the wax started to melt. Someone reset the scene. Next, I looked at the remote. It had smudges on the front, but only on the upper buttons. None on the back. Odd. For a man who probably flipped channels regularly. I asked the tech team to dust for prints. When I looked at the kitchen, I found a half-finished beer bottle on the counter. Still cold. No fingerprints. Then the trash can caught my eye. Right on top was a crumpled paper towel with what looked like pink smudges. Lipstick. But Dunley didn't date. His co-workers said he'd been single for months. So I pulled the footage from the neighbor's Ring camera. It didn't face his door directly, but it caught the reflection of something in the Dunleys' front window. A woman leaving the house around 11-12 p.m. long coat. Hood up, walked calmly to a parked sedan, and drove off. Now I had a ghost. Back inside, the tech team found something else. On the back of the remote, a fingerprint. Partial, but not Dunley's. It belonged to Lena Marks, 36, a real estate agent. She had shown Dunley 3 properties 2 months ago. A few friendly texts. Nothing more. But Lena had a sealed record. 2 years prior, she had been arrested for stalking a former client. Charges dropped. I called her in for questioning. She came in composed, even charming. Said she barely remembered Charles. Claimed she never visited his house. Had only met him once. So I asked her about the candle. She blinked. Candle. Vanilla scented. You lit it, didn't you? I asked. No, I hate that smell. That was her mistake. Because guess what we found in her car? A receipt. Gas station. 9:47 p.m. that same night. Among other items, one vanilla scented candle. She cracked. Turns out, Lena had let herself in. She had a copy of the house key. Swiped during a showing. She waited for him. Said she only wanted to talk. When he asked her to leave, she panicked. Claimed he insulted her. There's a strange kind of silence that clings to a house when something's not right. I've walked into hundreds of crime scenes in my life. Some noisy with grief, others echoing with sirens. But the ones that get under your skin are the quiet ones. The ones where everything looks normal until it doesn't. It was a chilly Thursday afternoon in Boulder, Colorado. The call came in from a neighbor who hadn't seen Aaron Lauder, a 33-year-old freelance graphic designer, in 3 days. No mail picked up. Lights off. Car still in the driveway. I arrived with the first unit on scene. No signs of forced entry. No broken glass. The front door was locked, but Aaron's sister had a spare key. We stepped in. The air was still, but the kind of still that feels staged, deliberate, like the house was holding its breath. I did what I always do. Scanned the space, slow and methodical. Nothing seemed disturbed. Then I saw it, the kitchen sink. It held a single white plate with faint red sauce smeared on the surface. No fork, no crumbs, no sponge nearby. Just the plate, still slightly damp. Why does that matter? Because the rest of the kitchen was spotless. Gleaming countertops, dry dish rack, not a stain in sight. And anyone who lives alone and is that neat doesn't leave just one dirty plate in the sink. They clean as they go. It stuck out, like a fingerprint left behind. We moved to the bedroom. Erin's bed was made. Laptop on the desk, screen dark, phone charging on the nightstand. No obvious signs of a struggle, no blood. But in the bathroom, tucked behind a bottle of lotion, we found a small drop of dry blood on the sink rim. Just one. Not enough to suggest violence, but enough to ask questions. Back in the kitchen, I looked again at the plate. The sauce looked recent, tomato-based. But when we opened the fridge, there was no pasta, no leftovers, nothing open. That plate wasn't from a meal Erin cooked. It was from someone else's food. That meant someone had been there very recently. We pulled phone records. Her last known text was to a friend at 6:12 p.m. on Monday. Casual, might accompany later. I'll call you TMRW. But she never did. That was the night she disappeared. Doorbell cam? Unfortunately, it had been turned off. Purposefully, the battery was removed. Another red flag. Erin wasn't careless. She'd posted online a week earlier about feeling creeped out by someone who'd been messaging her aggressively. We dug in. The name that came up was Jared Lowell, a 37-year-old copywriter she had briefly dated last year. Nothing serious. According to friends, she ended it after 2 weeks. Said he was too intense. He hadn't taken it well. Dozens of messages followed, most ignored. No restraining order filed. We brought Jared in. He denied everything. Claimed he hadn't spoken to her in months. Said he'd been at a pub Monday night, watching a game. I asked if he'd ever been to Erin's place. He hesitated, then admitted. Once, a long time ago, we got a warrant for his place. And that's when it broke open. In his kitchen garbage, buried under 2-day-old pizza boxes, we found an identical white plate. Same brand, same faint red sauce. When we tested the residue, it matched a prepackaged meal sold at a local organic market. A meal Jared had purchased on Monday. Receipt confirmed it. It meant he brought his food to Erin's, ate there, and left the plate in her sink. The only thing he didn't think to hide. When we searched further, we found Erin's earrings in his bathroom drawer and strands of her hair in his car's backseat. Pressed with the evidence, Jared broke. He said she let him in one last talk, but it turned into an argument. He shoved her. She hit her head. Panicked. He wrapped her body in a blanket and drove out to an abandoned field just outside Lyons. We found Erin the next morning, just like he described. The autopsy confirmed blunt force trauma. Not premeditated, but preventable. In the end, it was a plate. That one unwashed, unimportant-looking plate. That cracked the entire case. The object no killer thinks twice about. The detail that doesn't scream for attention, but quietly waits to be noticed. And that's the thing about crime scenes. Sometimes the loudest clue is what's left behind in silence. There are few things more frustrating in an investigation than digital footprints that vanish. I've seen hard drives wiped clean, surveillance footage mysteriously deleted, and phone logs that jump from complete to ghostly blank overnight. But nothing ever felt quite as eerie or calculated as an email that disappeared before it could be read. It started with a body. Thomas Wexler, 41 years old, corporate attorney, was found dead in his downtown Chicago apartment. A neighbor had reported a strange smell, and building security opened the door to find him slumped over at his desk. Natural causes were initially suspected. No forced entry, no trauma, no blood. But I've learned that death, like the truth, doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Thomas had been dead for about 36 hours when I arrived. His laptop was open mid-email, and his phone still charging beside it. A nearly full glass of whiskey sat next to the keyboard. All the signs pointed to him working late, taking a drink, and possibly suffering a stroke or heart failure. But something didn't sit right. First clue, The body, his posture was odd. Not like he collapsed, more like he was placed back into the chair. Neatly, hands on armrests. And the glass of whiskey? No fingerprints. Not even his. Clean as a lab slide. But the thing that triggered my gut was the computer screen. The email window was open, but empty. Just the subject line. If something happens to me, read this. No body types an ominous subject like that and then forgets the message. I dug deeper. With tech support on site, we pulled his sent and draft folders. Nothing, but the subject line had been created. That meant he'd started it. Somewhere between that click and his death, the content had vanished. Intentionally. I asked the forensics unit to do a metadata scan. Hidden in the temporary memory files, we found a partial autosave string. Just a line and a half. For the past 6 months, I've been followed. I think it's someone from... And then nothing. No autosave file. No full draft. No trace in cache. Someone had erased it, and not sloppily. This was surgical. I checked his internet activity. Hours before his death, Thomas had accessed a secure, encrypted email service, one often used by whistleblowers. He also downloaded a password-protected zip file onto a flash drive. The drive was gone. Not on his person, not in the apartment. That meant someone else had been there. We pulled building security footage. Front door, no one unusual. But the service elevator? That was offline from 1:14 a.m. to 1:53 a.m. The exact window during which his estimated time of death occurred. We later found out someone had removed the DVR hard drive entirely. Clean job. So who was he afraid of? We interviewed his colleagues. Most spoke well of him. Brilliant, sharp, discreet. But one name kept coming up with tension. Marla Jennings, a senior partner in his firm. Ruthless. Meticulous. And according to one assistant, Thomas had once referred to her as dangerous if cornered. I requested her financials. She'd been under investigation a decade ago for off-the-books lobbying. Nothing stuck, but her recent transactions were odd. 2 days before Thomas's death, she withdrew $10,000 in cash. Then nothing. That's when we got the breakthrough. A janitor who worked the late shift swore he saw someone leaving the service hallway that night. Woman, dark coat, in a hurry, around 2 a.m. We showed him a photo of Marla. He hesitated, then nodded. With a warrant, we search her home. No flash drive. But in her desk drawer, we found a list of encrypted passwords on Notepad, one of them matching the account Thomas used to upload his last files. She'd accessed it. She'd read what he wrote. And she had deleted it. But not before we found a mirrored backup of the encrypted zip file on a cloud node he'd used months earlier. Inside, hundreds of documents. Fraud, embezzlement, unauthorized surveillance orders, all pointing back to Marla. She knew he was planning to expose her, and she acted first. Toxicology revealed that Thomas had been poisoned. A rare neurotoxin slipped into his whiskey. Tasteless, nearly untraceable, fatal within hours. But she made one mistake. She thought deleting an email erased the truth. She didn't count on the subject line lingering. Didn't count on the autosave cache. Didn't count on the digital trail he'd left behind. Just subtle enough for someone like me to piece together. In the end, it wasn't what he said that solved the case. It was what he tried to say, what someone else feared he'd say. And the message that never got sent spoke louder than any confession.